The day they assigned me to Sergeant Wren, I thought I was being punished. I had wanted the bright posts. Every recruit does. The south gate, where the carriages come through and the crowds press 6 deep against the rail with their banners and their flowers. The court of lamps, where the household dines and the lords go by in their furs. Anywhere a man could be seen standing tall, and feel that the standing meant something because people were there to watch it. Instead, the master of the watch read my name from the roll on my first morning at Aldermere, looked at me a moment longer than he looked at the others, and said, "You'll learn the north door from Sergeant Wren. Go up. He's expecting you." The north door of Aldermere Palace is not a door anyone arrives by. It is a tall, plain, iron-bound thing at the head of a cold flight of stone, looking out over the old kitchen yard and the river beyond it, and beyond the river nothing but the gray hills going up into mist. No crowd ever stood there. No carriage ever came. In 200 years, the histories say, no king ever passed through it on any day a chronicler thought worth writing down. I climbed the stone with my new boots too stiff and my collar cutting my throat, and I told myself, behind my teeth where it was safe, that I had been given the post nobody wanted because I was the man nobody wanted, and that I would prove them wrong by getting off it as fast as I could. Sergeant Wren was already there. I want to tell you what I saw because it is the first thing he ever taught me, though he did not say a word for a quarter of an hour after I came up. He was an old man, not bent. I never once saw him bent, but old in the way an oak is old, where the age is a kind of weight that holds the rest of the world a little steadier just by being there. He stood at the north door in the full kit, the red wool and the tall black bearskin and the white gloves, the rifle at his shoulder, his eyes forward on nothing, on the gray hills, on the empty yard. And he was so completely still that for one long breath I thought I had come up the stair to relieve a statue some sculptor had dressed in a real man's clothes. Then a starling came down off the gutter and landed on the toe of his boot. It sat there. It looked around the way they do, quick and stupid and bright-eyed. And the sergeant did not move, not the rifle, not the gloves, not so much as the muscle of his jaw, and the bird, finding nothing in him to be afraid of, finding him as fixed and safe as the stone, took its time and flew off when it was ready. Only then, when it had gone, did he speak. "You'll be Edrin," he said. He did not turn his head. "They told me they were sending up the one who didn't want to come." I felt my face go hot. "Sergeant, I never said." "You didn't have to say it. It was on you when you came up the stair. It's on every man they send up here the first morning." Still he did not look at me. "Take the post, the empty one on my left, heels on the line, eyes where mine are. We'll talk at the relief." I took the post. I stood the way I had been drilled to stand, which I would learn within the hour was not standing at all but a kind of frantic clenching, a man holding his breath against the whole of the morning. And I stared out at the emptiest view in the kingdom, at a yard where nothing happened and a river where nothing came, and I waited to be told why a place like this needed guarding, and what on earth a man like that had done to be left here to guard it, and how soon I could get away. I would stand that post beside him for the better part of a year. And I have stood it for the 11 years since, every day I was able, and I am telling you all of this now because next week a recruit I have not yet met will come up that same stair with his boots too stiff and his collar cutting his throat, thinking he has been punished. And on the last morning I stand the north door I am going to give him a small worn thing out of my own kit. And I want, before I do, to be sure I understand exactly what it is I am handing on. Because Sergeant Wren gave it to me, and I have carried it 11 years, and I am only now certain I know what it weighs. But I am ahead of myself. Let me go back to the relief that first day, when he finally told me why the north door is guarded. We came down the stair together, when the second pair relieved us. My legs were shaking from the stillness, in a way they never shook from the longest march. He took me not to the guard-room but out across the kitchen yard to a low stone bench against the south wall in the one patch of sun, and he sat, and he took off the white gloves finger by finger slow, and laid them across his knee, and I saw that his hands were an old soldier's hands, scarred across the knuckles, one finger that had been broken and set a little crooked. And I saw, too, that the gloves themselves were old. Not dirty, never dirty. I would learn what an hour with the brush and the white block cost, but old, the leather gone soft and pale and shaped to his hands the way a thing gets shaped only by years. "You want to know what's behind the north door?" he said. "Yes, Sergeant." "Stores, old stores. Linen the household stopped using 60 years ago, furniture out of rooms that were shut up before either of us was born, the boxes the last 3 stewards couldn't decide what to do with." He looked at me sideways, and there was something at the corner of his mouth that was not quite a smile. "Nothing worth a single night of a single man, by the weight of it. You could leave that door wide open for a year and lose nothing the kingdom would miss." "Then why?" "That," he said, "is the question they send every man up here to stop asking. Most of them never do. They stand at a season, hating it, waiting for a bright post, and the day they get one they go down that stair and never think of the north door again." He turned the soft, pale gloves over on his knee. "I'm going to teach you the answer instead. It'll take longer than the answers you want, but it's the only one that's any good to a man at 3 in the morning in the rain, with nobody watching and nothing happening and a whole night still to stand." I did not understand him. I told him so, plainly, the way the young tell the old that they have not yet been worth the trouble of explaining anything to. He nodded as if I had said something sensible. Then he stood and pulled the soft gloves back on, finger by finger, and the old soldier's hands disappeared into the white, and the man went back to being the post. "Good," he said. "A man who knows he doesn't understand is half taught already. Come up tomorrow at the dark hour. Not the morning watch, the dark one, the one before it. I'll show you the thing the morning men never see." And he left me there in the sun with the whole of it in front of me, and no idea at all what it was. I came up at the dark hour. It is a thing they do not tell you about when they put the uniform on you and the crowds cheer, and the band plays, that the work, the real work, happens at the hours when there is no crowd and no band and no light, in the cold that lives in old stone and never quite leaves it. I came up the stair with a lantern and found him already at the post, and he made me put the lantern out, and we stood in the dark with the river a sound below us and the hills gone and the whole world narrowed to the few feet a man can feel without seeing. "Now," he said quietly, "tell me what's wrong." "Sergeant, something's wrong out there tonight. Stand still and tell me what it is." I stood. I strained my eyes at a dark that gave me nothing. I listened and heard the river and the wind in the gutter and somewhere far off a dog. "I don't, Sergeant, I can't see anything. There's nothing there." "There's the dog," he said. "How long has he been barking?" I had not been counting. It had not occurred to me that a dog was a thing a man on a dead post should count. "I don't know." 19 minutes. Same note, same place, down by the lower wharf. A dog that's barking at a fox stops when the fox moves on. A dog that's been barking 19 minutes at the same spot is barking at a man who's staying put where he shouldn't be. He had not moved. His voice came out of the dark beside me as level as if he were reading me the weather. "It's nothing tonight. It'll be the ferryman's boy, courting, or a drunk asleep in the reeds. But you'll learn the difference between the nights it's nothing and the night it isn't by standing 1,000 nights when it's nothing and never once deciding, because it was nothing last night, that it'll be nothing tonight." I will not pretend I understood the whole of it that first dark hour. But I understood a piece, and the piece frightened me a little, in the good way that the start of any real thing frightens a man. I understood that the stillness I had taken for emptiness was the opposite of empty. He was not standing there doing nothing. He was standing there doing the hardest thing a man can do, which is to pay perfect attention to a world that has given him, for 19 years, almost nothing to attend to, and to keep paying it anyway every night, against the whole pull of his own tiredness and his own boredom, and his own perfectly reasonable certainty that nothing was ever going to happen. Because the one night something did, the whole worth of all the empty nights would be paid back at once. And a man who had let himself go soft on the nights, it was nothing, would not be ready for the night it was everything. The bright posts, he said, as if he had heard the thought I had not spoken, teach a man to be watched. That's a fine thing. The household needs men who can stand tall while 10,000 stare. But it's the easy thing. Any vain man can stand straight when there's a crowd to stand straight for. The north door teaches the hard thing. He paused, and the dog stopped barking, and far below us we heard, faint and harmless, a young man's laugh and a girl's, going away along the wharf. It teaches a man to hold his post when there is nobody at all, to see whether he holds it or not. And that, Edrin, is the only kind of holding that's worth anything. Because the day will come for you, for me, for every man who ever stood a line, when the thing that's right and the thing anyone would notice are two different things. And on that day, the only man you can trust is the one who learned, on a dead post in the dark, to do the right thing for no reward but that it's right. That was the lesson. He never put it more plainly than that, and he never needed to, because after that night he did not teach me with sayings. He taught me with the post itself. He taught me the white block and the brush, the hour it takes to make the gloves perfect, and the meaning of taking that hour for a door no one would walk through. A man who keeps himself perfect where no one can see, he said, is a man who keeps himself perfect, full stop. The crowd post will tempt you to keep only the front of you clean. Up here there's no front and no back. There's only whether you're the kind of man who'd let himself go because nobody's looking. Don't be. He taught me the count of the relief, and the muster book, and why a post is never left until the man who relieves it is standing on the line with his own name written down, not when the danger's past, not when you're tired, not when a senior officer waves you off, until you're relieved by name in person. The post doesn't end because you're done with it. It ends when the next man has it. He taught me to read the yard the way a farmer reads a sky. The gull that comes inland before weather, the carter who's a stranger, the window 2 floors down that has no business showing a light at the dark hour, the 1,000 small wrongnesses that a man learns only by standing in the rightness so long that the wrong stands out from it like a struck note. And once, only once that whole year, the post was not nothing. It was a winter night, sleeting, the kind of night the body begs a man to lean on something. A light showed in the long stores behind the north door, where no light should be, and a sound came that was a man's boot on the old boards, and I felt my heart go up into my throat and my hand go to the door. And the sergeant's gloved hand came down over mine, light as the starling on his boot, and held it there. "Wait," he breathed. "Read it first. Always read it first. A man who flies at the first wrong thing is no use. He spends himself on the ferryman's boy and has nothing left for the wolf. What do you hear?" I made myself wait. I made myself read it the way he had taught me, and I heard under my own fear that the boot was unsure, that the light was moving the wrong way for a thief, that whoever it was kept stopping and once faintly coughed. "He's lost," I said, surprising myself. "He's not taking anything. He's looking for the way out." "He is." And the sergeant opened the door himself, calm as morning, and we found an old man in there, one of the household pensioners gone wandering in his confusion out of the warm rooms and into the cold dark of the stores, frightened half to death and shivering in his nightshirt. The sergeant took off his own greatcoat and put it round the old man's shoulders, and walked him down to the warm with a hand under his arm, talking to him low and easy the whole way, and never once made him feel that he had done a foolish thing. When he came back up to the post he said only, "That's what the north door is for, not for the wolf. The wolf almost never comes. It's for the lost old man on the cold night that nobody but the man on the dead post would ever have found." He took the post again. "Everyone watches the bright gate. Nobody watches the dark door. That's exactly why the dark door has to be true." I stopped wanting the bright post somewhere in that year. I cannot tell you the day it happened, because it did not happen on a day. It happened the way the soft comes into leather, by 1,000 hours of the same pressure, until one morning I came up the stair and stood the post and felt, for the first time, that I was not waiting to be somewhere else. I was where I was supposed to be. The master of the watch offered me the south gate that spring, the very thing I had ached for, and I heard myself thank him and ask to stay on the north door, and the look he gave me then was the same long look he had given me my first morning, only it had turned all the way round and become something else. "Wren's made you," he said, almost to himself, and let me stay. The years went the way years go on a post that does not change. I learned the yard so well I could have read it blind. I learned the river's moods and the gulls and the strangers and the windows. I found, in my own turn, lost old men and frightened housemaids, and once a runaway boy from the village who had got himself over the wall on a dare and then could not get back. And I gave him my greatcoat and walked him down and never made him feel a fool, because that was how it was done, because that was what the post was for. And beside me, year on year, the old sergeant stood, a little slower to climb the stair each winter, never 1 inch less still once he was on the line until the morning came. I had been 11 years on the door by then, and he passed 40, when he climbed up at the change of watch, took his place on my right, and said, looking out at the gray hills the way he always looked out at them, "This is my last season, Edrin." I did not answer at once. A man does not, at a thing like that. "The board signed it," he went on. "I'm to stand the door through the turn of the year and stand down at the spring relief. 41 years a guardsman, the last 26 of them on this stair." He paused. "They've asked me who's to have the door after me, and then they've asked me to do the thing I least wanted to be asked." "Train your own replacement," I said. "I knew it the way you know the end of a road you have walked a long time." Train my own replacement. A starling came down, there is always a starling, and walked along the rail in front of us, and neither of us moved, and it went on its way. There's a recruit coming up, young. Wanted the bright posts by the report, didn't want the north door, thinks he's been punished. The corner of his mouth did the thing that was not quite a smile. I have stood beside that exact young man before. You stood beside me. I did, and the man who trained me stood beside him the same way on this same stair 41 years ago, and gave me at the end of it the same thing his man gave him. He was quiet a moment. "You don't know about the gloves." "The gloves, Sergeant." He held up his right hand, in the soft pale white glove gone the color of old ivory, shaped to his hand by 26 years. "These were not issued to me," he said. "Issue gloves are stiff and new, and they belong to no one. These belong to Sergeant Mallow, who had the north door before me, who got them from the man before him, who I am told got them from a guardsman whose name has gone out of the book entirely. On the last morning a man stands this door, if he has made another man worthy of it, he takes off these gloves and he gives them to that man, and the man who gets them stands the door in them until his own last morning, and then he gives them on. They have been on this stair longer than anyone living can say." He turned the glove over, looking at it. "They are not the kingdom's gloves, you understand. The kingdom has nothing to do with them. They are the doors. They are the part of the post that never stands down." I looked at the gloves and I understood, all at once and with a kind of vertigo, what I was looking at, that the thing I had taken 11 years before for a dead post that no king ever passed, and no chronicler ever wrote of, was in fact the oldest unbroken thing in the whole palace, older than any reign, a watch that had not lapsed for a single night in longer than anyone could name, kept alive not by walls or by orders, but by one old man teaching one young one, over and over down the years. What the stillness was for and why the dark door had to be true, the kingdom did not know it was there. That, I saw now, was exactly the point. It was there so that the kingdom did not have to know. "You mean to give them to me?" I said. "No," said Sergeant Wren, and before the disappointment could finish its quick, cruel work in me, he said, "I gave you everything I had to give 11 years ago, and you took it, And you've stood this door true for 11 years with nobody watching, which is the only proof that counts. You don't need the gloves to know what they mean. You are the man who knows, which is exactly why I'm giving the gloves to him." I did not follow. "The recruit," he said patiently. "The boy who doesn't want to come. I'm going to train him the way I trained you, the way Mallow trained me. And on my last morning I'm going to give him these gloves. And here is what I am asking you for, Edrin, because I will not be here to do it myself and you will. When I am gone, and the boy has the gloves, and the first hard winter night comes when he is sure the post is nothing and nobody is watching and he might as well lean on the wall, you are going to be the man who stands beside him and keeps the door true until he learns what you learned. The gloves go to him. But the teaching, the real thing, the thing the gloves only stand for, the teaching I'm leaving to you." He looked at me then, full on, which he almost never did. "A thing carried by one man dies with one man. I'm not handing this to a pair of gloves. I'm handing it to two men, so that when the leather finally wears through, the watch doesn't. I have served the crown the best part of my life. I have stood at coffins and at coronations, and once for 19 straight hours through a flood. I have never in all of it been given a charge that weighed what that one weighed, spoken low on a cold morning at a door no one walks through, by an old man with 3 months left to stand. I'll keep it true," I said. "It was all I had." "I know you will," said Sergeant Wren. "That's why it's you I'm asking." And the recruit came up the stair the next week, with his boots too stiff and his collar cutting his throat, looking at the emptiest view in the kingdom as though it were a punishment, and I watched the old sergeant turn his head a fraction and say, in the voice I had heard 11 years before, "You'll be the one they sent up who didn't want to come." The boy's name was Tam. He was 18, all elbows and pride, and he had wanted the Court of Lamps so badly that the disappointment came off him like heat off a stove. I knew that disappointment from the inside. I had been it. So I stood my post on the boy's far side and said nothing, and let the old man do what the old man did, which was to teach him nothing at all for a quarter of an hour, and let the stillness do the first of the talking. The starling came down on the toe of the sergeant's boot. It always did. And Tam watched it sit there, and watched the old man not move, and I saw the boy's face change in exactly the way I imagined my own changed 11 years before. The small startled understanding that the stillness in front of him was not the stillness of a man who had nothing in him, but of a man who had so much in him, held so still, that a wild thing could mistake him for the safe and solid earth. That was the autumn the sergeant taught his last recruit, and I had the strange grace of watching from the side a thing I had only ever known from underneath. I watched him take the boy out to the sunny bench at the relief, and tell him about the old linen behind the door, nothing worth a single night of a single man, and watched the boy's mouth open with the same why I had once carried. I watched him bring the boy up at the dark hour and make him put out the lantern and ask him what was wrong, and heard the boy, frightened, say there's nothing there, and heard the old man say, "There's the dog. How long has he been barking?" I watched him teach the white block and the brush and the meaning of an hour spent on perfection no one would see. And I watched, more than once, the boy chafe and slump and let the boredom show on a night he was sure was nothing, and I watched the old sergeant correct him, never sharply, never with a saying when a silence would serve, until slowly, the way the soft comes into leather, the boy began to stop waiting to be somewhere else. It does not happen on a day. But there was a night near the turn of the year, sleeting, the kind of night the body begs a man to lean, when a light showed where no light should and the boy's hand flew to the door, and I saw the old sergeant's gloved hand come down over the boy's, light as the starling, and heard him breathe, "Wait, read it first. Always read it first." And the boy made himself wait and made himself read it and said, in a voice gone suddenly steady, "He's lost. He's not a thief. He's looking for the way out." And it was a household pensioner, gone wandering in the cold in his nightshirt, frightened half to death. And the boy took off his own greatcoat before the sergeant could move and put it round the old man's shoulders and walked him down to the warm with a hand under his arm, talking low and easy the whole way, and never once made him feel he had done a foolish thing. The old sergeant watched the boy go down the stair with the pensioner. Then he looked at me across the empty post, and he did not say anything, and he did not need to. The boy had become the man. The thing was carried. The only question left was the leather. Winter wore down toward the spring relief. The old sergeant climbed the stair slower and slower. Some mornings I came early and found him resting on the third landing, not because he could not make the rest of it, but because he had learned to spend his strength the way a careful man spends the last of anything, and he would wave me on and follow in his own time and be on the line, perfect, before the watch changed. He never let the boy see him rest on the landing. That was deliberate, and I understood it, and I went up ahead so the boy would never know. A man trains his replacement in everything, even in how to be old at a post one day with no one seeing the cost of it. He told the boy about the gloves on the last dark-hour watch before the relief. I was there on the far side, where I had stood the whole season. He held up his right hand in the soft white glove gone the color of old ivory, and he told the boy the thing he had told me, that they were not issued, that they had belonged to Sergeant Mallow and to the man before Mallow and to a guardsman whose name had gone clean out of the book, that on the last morning a man stood the door. If he had made another man worthy of it, he gave the gloves on, and the man who got them stood the door in them until his own last morning and then gave them on again. So that the watch had not lapsed for a single night in longer than anyone living could say. I watched the boy's face as the size of it came home to him. I watched him understand, as I had understood, that the dead post no king ever passed was the oldest unbroken thing in the whole palace, kept alive not by walls or by the crown, but by one old man teaching one young one, over and over down the years, what the stillness was for. "You mean to give them to me," the boy said very low. "On the last morning," said Sergeant Wren, "if you'll have them, and you'll have them on one condition, which is the only condition there has ever been." He nodded across the post at me, the way you nod at a thing that has been settled a long time. "That you let the man beside you keep teaching you what the gloves only stand for until the night you don't need teaching. The gloves are leather, Tam. Leather wears through. The watch is not in the leather. The watch is in the next man and the next man after him. You carry the gloves, but you keep the door true with him, and the day comes you stand beside a frightened boy who didn't want to come, and you do for him what was done for you. That's the gloves. Everything else is just the color of the cloth." The boy looked at the old white gloves a long time. Then he looked at me, and then back at the sergeant, and he said the only thing there is to say, which I had said 11 years before in nearly the same words. "I'll keep it true." "I know you will," said Sergeant Wren. "That's why it's you." And then it was the last morning, the spring relief. 41 years a guardsman, 26 of them on a stair no one walks, come down at last to a single climb up the cold stone in the gray light, the river loud below, the hills going up into mist the way they had gone up into mist on the first morning I ever stood beside him and mistook him for stone. There was no band, no crowd, no carriage came, none ever had. The master of the watch had asked the old man, weeks before, whether he would not like his last morning marked at the south gate, with the household out and the colors flying and the people cheering, a proper send-off, the bright thing, the watch thing. And the old sergeant had thanked him and refused, and asked to stand his last hour where he had stood his life, at the north door, at the dark hour going into the gray, with no one there but the two men who knew what the door was. So there were 3 of us on the stone that morning. The old man in the center in the full kit, the soft white gloves on his hands, the boy on his right, stiff with the size of the day, and me on his left where I had stood 11 years. We stood the watch through. He would have it no other way, not a ceremony, but the work, the last hour of the work done exactly as the first hour had been done. We read the yard. The gull came inland before the weather, and he marked it, and the boy marked it, and I marked it. And none of us said a word, because we all three saw the same thing, and the seeing was the whole conversation. A carter came across the lower wharf, and the boy's eyes went to him, and the old man murmured, "Known man, the Tuesday flower," and the boy's eyes came off him. And that was a lesson given and taken in 4 words on the last morning, the way the best of them always were. The light came gray up the river. The starling came down on the toe of his boot and sat, and looked around with its quick, stupid, bright eye, and found him as fixed and safe as the stone, and took its time, and flew off when it was ready. I think that was the thing he had waited for. I think he would not have called it the last morning until the bird had come. When the relief pair appeared at the foot of the stair, he did not move to go. He turned instead to the boy, and in the gray light, slowly, finger by finger, the way I had watched him do it on the sunny bench 11 years before, he took off the white gloves. His hands came out into the cold, the old soldier's hands, scarred across the knuckles, the one crooked finger, and I understood that I was watching the oldest unbroken thing in the palace pass from one living hand to another, as it had passed before any of us were born and would pass after all of us were gone. He smoothed the gloves once, flat, the leather gone the color of old ivory, shaped by 26 years of his own hands to the exact shape of holding a post true in the dark, and he held them out to the boy. "They're not the kingdom's," he said. His voice was very quiet, very steady, the voice I had first heard out of the dark beside me. "The kingdom doesn't know they exist. That's the point of them. You stand the door in these, true, on the nights nobody's watching, and on your last morning you find the man you've made and you give them on. And between now and then, when it's hard, when it's 3 in the morning and sleeting, and you're sure it's nothing and nobody would ever know if you leaned on the wall," he glanced at me, "once, you keep the door true with the man on your left and he with you, so that the watch is never in one pair of hands and never dies with one man." He pressed the gloves into the boy's hands and closed the boy's fingers over them with his own bare ones. "There, you have the door." The boy could not speak. He stood there with the old soft gloves in his 2 hands and the tears standing in his eyes and not falling, because a guardsman on the line does not let them fall, and that holding that, more than anything the old man had ever said, was the proof that the boy was made. He drew the gloves on finger by finger. They were a little large. They had been a little large for me too, 11 years before, and they fit a man by the end of a life, not the start of one. And when his hands disappeared into the white, the boy stood up straight at the north door, and he was the post, and the watch had not lapsed. Then the old man, bare-handed now, a guardsman no longer, just an old man on a cold stair, looked at the empty view he had given his life to, the river and the gray hills and the yard where almost nothing ever happened, and he said, so low I think it was meant only for himself, "Well, it held." He came down the stair slowly, and I went with him, one hand near his arm without touching it, the way he had taught me a man helps another man without taking his dignity from him. At the bottom he stopped and looked back up at the door, at the boy standing the post in the gloves, small against the gray sky. "He'll do," he said. "You'll see he does." "I'll see he does," I said. "Then I'm relieved," said Sergeant Wren, and only then after 41 years did he let himself say it in person by name by the next sworn man. "The post stands." He smiled, the whole smile this time, the one I had waited 11 years to be given. "It was never mine, you know. It was never any of ours. We just kept it true and handed it on. That's the whole of the work, Edrin. That's the whole of the honor. There's nothing else under any of it but that." He stood down that spring. He lived 4 more years in a cottage by the lower wharf where he could hear the river, and I went to see him when I could, and on the bad days near the end the one thing that would settle him was to be told the north door was held, that the boy stood it true, that the watch had not lapsed. "Good," he would say, every time, his eyes already closing. "Good, it held. And it had. It does." I am the senior man on the stair now, and the boy, he is not a boy any longer. He is a sergeant with 11 years on the door and a steadiness I am proud of past my ability to say. The boy will give those gloves on in his own turn to a recruit not yet born, on a gray morning none of us will see. And next week, a new one comes up the stone, with his boots too stiff and his collar cutting his throat, thinking he has been punished, looking at the emptiest view in the kingdom as though it were the end of something. I will be waiting at the north door when he comes. I will let the stillness do the first of the talking. And when the starling comes down on the toe of my boot, as it always does, and the boy watches it sit there unafraid, I will turn my head a fraction and say, in the voice an old man gave me on a cold morning a lifetime ago, "You'll be the one they sent up who didn't want to come." And I will teach him the door. And on my own last morning, if I have made him worthy of it, I will take off these gloves, the color of old ivory now, shaped to my hands by 11 years of holding a post true in the dark, and I will give them on. The kingdom will never know. That is the point of them. The watch is never in the leather. It is in the next man and the next and the one after that, standing the dark door true on the nights no one is watching, which is the only kind of standing, the old man taught me, that was ever worth anything at all. It held, it holds, it will hold after me. That is the whole of the work. That is the whole of the honor, and there is nothing else under any of it but that.